Hi, everybody. I'm Mike McCrory, and this little guy is.
I'm Liam. I'm Mike's neighbor, and I asked Mike a couple months ago if I could get a side table potentially done for after I graduate. That way, when I move out my parents' place and get my own place, I'll have two awesome side tables for my bedroom.
And normally that's something you would just buy online, but Liam has to duck when he goes through a standard 80-inch doorway. So we're going to build them and size them accordingly. So let's get started. We're going to start by making the legs for the end table. These will be about 1 3/4 inches square with tapered ends. We're starting with rough cut 8/4 red oak. Liam will run each piece on the jointer to flatten one face and one edge. Next, we'll run the pieces through the planer to mill them down to a little more than 1 3/4 inches. They ended up being about 1.8 inches, so we'll set the table saw fence and cut each of the legs to that width. We were able to get 3 legs out of each piece, so we cut 9 legs in total to have an extra one just in case we make a mistake later on. Liam's family is pretty tall. Even their kitchen counters are about 42 inches high instead of the standard 36 inches, so we're making the legs of these bedside tables longer than usual. Now we'll run them through the planer one more time to get them down to be perfectly square. Now they're ready for us to taper the ends. Okay, so these are 1.83 inches in a fraction that's 1 53/64. So that's going to be a problem for the math when we compute the numbers for the taper, because we're going to have to divide that number in half and then in half again. It's going to be challenging. So let's use metric. That's going to be a little easier for the math. So that's 46 millimeters roughly. So we've got 46 millimeters. And at the end here for the taper, we want this to be about 1 inch at the end. So if this is 1 inch, which is about 25 millimeters, that means we've got to take off 21 millimeters. And so that means we need to take off about 10 millimeters on each side. So that's where we had to cut in half. And then we're going to do this on the jointer. And to remove the 10 millimeters, we're going to do it in 2 passes, which means for the first pass, we're going to remove 5 millimeters. And then the second pass, we're going to remove another 5 millimeters. Now, my measuring gauge is only in inches. So we're going to convert that back to inches. So 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters is about 1/4 inch. So I think we'd be safe if we took off 3/16 of an inch on each pass on the jointer. So I'm going to use this. I'll take 3/16. I'll just draw a line here. And the reason I'm doing this is we want to be able to calibrate the jointer so that we're taking off exactly 3/16 of an inch. I'm going to set this to be right about there. If this measurement gauge is calibrated, which it likely is, but if it is, that'll be pretty close to this line. So we'll do a test cut. For precision here, we want to be roughly an inch on the bottom, so that's pretty close to 3/16. So that measurement gauge is pretty well calibrated. Okay, so I'm going to take all this off now. And now what I want to do is I'm going to turn the jointer on, and I'm going to use this straight edge and bring it up just, I'm going to wait for it to stop, but I'm going to bring it up to just where the blade starts to touch it. So I'm going to turn it on, find out where it's touching, and I'm going to draw a line here to mark that point. That line here, and that's going to be important for cutting the taper. Now we want the length of our taper to be 8 inches, so it's a relatively short taper. It's just the bottom of the leg, and so I'm going to mark the midway point. Here's my square to just transfer that line all the way around. Okay, so we'll take this to the jointer. We're going to do the first pass by cutting to the midpoint, and then we're going to turn it around and cut all the way through. It's pretty magical the way it works. We're going to feed it in at the bottom of the leg first, and we're going to go to the midpoint right to there. I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to push down here so that this is touching, and when the blade first touches the piece of wood, and this is pushed down, when the blade first touches, it's going to touch right here. That's where it's going to begin the cut, and it's going to taper it uniformly all the way down to the bottom. It's a little tricky to hold this, especially with such a short taper. I was going to get Liam to try doing it, but when I saw how he was placing his fingers under the board, I thought it was best for me to take over, and so did he. It's easier to do this without the blade guard on, but I can still get it done with the blade guard in place. That's the end of our first day. The next week, Liam went for open heart surgery, so things were at a standstill while he recovered for several months. Next, with a stop block in place, we'll cut all 8 legs to be the same length. Now we'll cut a couple of pieces of plywood into manageable widths, and then we can cut them to size on the table saw. We'll start by cutting them to the correct width, and then we'll get out my crosscut sled and cut them to length. The exact length is not as important as getting them all the same, so we used a stop block at the end of the sled to be sure they were all the same length. A standard bedside table is about 24 inches high, but we're cutting these side pieces to be about 26 inches long to get an overall height of around 35 inches. Now, in the back of each night table, we're going to cut an opening, and then we'll attach the cutout piece with magnets so that it can be opened up. We'll install a power strip inside, and then the door can be removed to connect wires. Liam has recovered from his surgery, but now I'm the problem because I spent the first half of 2024 renovating my daughter's kitchen. To keep the project simple, we're going to attach everything with pocket hole screws. Liam's using this Craig pocket hole jig to drill 4 pocket holes along each edge. And then we'll add glue, clamp everything in place so that they don't shift, and then we'll screw them together. And then we'll do the same with the back piece. I've been busy working on other projects, and Liam disappeared, but he showed up one day in October to work on the drawers. Now that we know the inside dimensions of each night table, we can start making the drawers. We're using 12mm Baltic birch plywood, and we're cutting the drawer pieces to width. Each night table will have 3 drawers. The top 2 will be about 5 inches deep, and the bottom drawer will be about 7 inches deep. Next, we'll cut everything to the correct length. The top 2 drawers will only be about 12 inches deep to leave room for the power strip near the top, and then the bottom drawer will be about 16 inches deep. We'll use the quarter method to make the drawers because it's a simple setup, really quick to cut everything, and it results in a strong joint for the drawer boxes. Starting with a 1/4 inch dado blade that is 1/4 inch away from the fence and 1/4 inch high, we'll cut a dado along the ends of the drawer sides. For the drawer fronts and backs, I've inserted a 1/4 inch piece of hardboard along the fence, and now I can cut a rabbet that creates a tongue that will insert into the dados that we just cut in the drawer sides. It fits really well. Next, I'll remove that piece of hardboard and cut a groove along the inside of each drawer piece for the plywood bottom to fit into. I'll cut the 1/4 inch plywood bottoms, then sand everything and glue the drawers together. You don't really need to use these corner squares because the plywood bottom will help to ensure everything is square, but it doesn't hurt to ensure everything is truly square. Liam disappeared again, so I'll glue up the rest of the drawers and hope he comes back next year. It's 6 months later and Liam is back, so we'll work on the shelf that goes near the top of the night table, near the back, to hold the power strip. I need to cut out the corners on the bandsaw to fit around the legs. I'll just use a jigsaw to cut out the rectangular holes for the power strip, so I'll drill a 5/16 inch hole in each corner to get the jigsaw blade started. Because the legs on the inside of the cabinet sit proud of the sides of the cabinet, I need to cut some strips of wood to pad the side of the cabinet before installing the drawer slides. I'll glue these on and tack them in place with some 1-inch pin nails. The drawer slides are supposed to be set back from the front by 2 millimeters, so I'm using a 3/32 inch spacer, which is pretty close to 2 millimeters. Liam may not be back for months, so I'll just continue on my own. Next, I'm making a bottom shelf for the cabinet, and just like the shelf at the top, I need to cut out the corners to fit around the legs. I don't normally use iron-on edge banding very often, and this stuff I had on hand is at least 20 years old, so that's why it looks a little dark. But it's a quick and easy way to finish the exposed plywood edge. They make special trimmers for this, but I'll just use a knife and some sandpaper. Now I'll finish around the back door with some iron-on edge banding. It's nice how the grain matches when it's in place. Now I'll drill 12mm holes for the rare earth magnets. I'll use some Starbond CA glue to hold them in place, and I'll let that dry for a couple of hours to make sure the magnets are secure before I test them out. And then I cut a semicircular hole using a 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit. This will be enough room to fit a finger inside to pull open the door. I can't iron on this last piece of edge banding, but I can use a heat gun to melt the glue and then apply some pressure while it's still hot. We're going to have a power strip in the bottom shelf as well. This power strip will plug into the wall, and the upper power strip will plug into this one. Now we can drill pocket hole screws into the bottoms and get them installed. Now I'll glue the upper shelf in and clamp it in place. Next, I'll install magnets into these two small pieces. These will be used to hold the door in place. To make sure everything is properly aligned, I'll use the magnets to dictate where everything should go, and then clamp the pieces in place while the glue dries. It's only been a couple of weeks and Liam is back. I think we might actually finish this project. Next, we'll cut the tops. I'll make these to be 25.5 inches wide and about 19 inches deep, and then I will apply 3/8 inch oak edge banding around the perimeter. But first, I will work on something to conceal the cord. We want to be able to hide the cord that runs from the upper power strip to the lower power strip. So I'm making this little piece that will attach with magnets so that it can be opened up to position the cord. It will have two thin strips with magnets that are glued onto the back of the cabinet near the bottom, and then this cover will attach to those two strips with the magnets, and the cord will run between those two strips and be concealed by the cover. While the glue is curing, we can work on the drawer fronts. I have a 6-inch wide piece of red oak for the 4 smaller drawers, and a 9-inch wide piece for the larger drawer fronts. The 9-inch piece is too wide for my jointer, so I'll cut off an inch. The actual drawer front is going to be about 7.5 inches, so it's okay to lose that 1 inch, which was pretty rough anyways. Next, I'll run it through the planer. I've turned on a sound app to see how loud it is because I'm finally going to upgrade to a helical cutter head. So I thought it would be interesting to check out the sound levels of the regular blades versus the helical carbide cutter heads. With the original blades, it came in at right around 95 decibels. Now I'll take the planer apart, remove the blades, and install the new cutter head. This one was supplied to me free of charge by Find by Tool. I was planning to upgrade anyway, so this was perfect timing because at least one of my blades had a nick in it that was leaving a little ridge on everything that I planed. I'm hopeful that these new cutter heads will last a long time, and they might be the last that I ever need. I just rotated the carbide cutters on my jointer after 5 years, so that means I might get another 15 years of life out of those cutters. If the same holds true for these, then I should be able to get about 20 years out of these. There are plenty of detailed videos on YouTube about how to remove and install a helical cutter head, so I won't go into too much detail here, but this should provide a good overview of the steps you need to take. After removing the first blade, one trick that is not obvious is that you need to push down on this blade locking mechanism to rotate the head. After that, it's just tedious work to remove all the screws. On the left side, I removed the gearbox. Then I used a 6mm wrench to remove the gear on the end of the cutter head, while using a 3/4 inch wrench on the inside to keep the cutter head from rotating. And then on the right side, I removed the cover, the tensioner, and the chain assembly, and then pulled the belt off the pulley while rotating and pulling toward me. Then I used a 15/16 inch socket wrench to remove the nut so that I could pull off the pulley. The nut may actually be a metric size, but I don't have any metric sockets that large. The 15/16 inch socket worked fine though. This large snap ring was a little tricky to remove because it kept slipping off the end of my tool, but I finally got it. Next, I used a 15mm socket and a heavy hammer to persuade the cutter head to come out. It needs quite a bit of force, but you don't want to damage it, so that's why I used a socket to not apply force directly to the end of the cutter head. Once it's loose, you can pull it out from the other side. Then you need to install the new cutter head. It's also a tight fit, but I didn't have to use as much force this time, so I wasn't too concerned about damaging it. I probably could have removed the nut on the end and used the same socket to apply equal force around the outside of the shaft. You just need to get it in far enough to be able to insert the large snap ring, and then repeat all the steps in the reverse order to put everything back together. The carbide cutter heads are supplied in packs of 10, so they provide 60 cutter heads, but only 56 are needed. Each side of the cutter head is marked with a number, so you want to be sure that you install them with all the same number facing the same direction. That way, it makes it easy to rotate them in the future and keep track of them. I don't have a torque wrench, so I just tried my best to tighten them the same amount. You want them to be quite tight, but not too tight because it's easy to crack a carbide cutter head if you apply too much force. Now it's time to test it. With the same sound level app and the same pieces of wood, it seems to be running at about 10 decibels quieter, which is nice. But more importantly, it's cutting with a glass-like finish that is super smooth. I think it's definitely worth the upgrade, and they're less than $400, so that's nothing if I can get 20 years out of this new cutter head. If you're thinking of upgrading, I've put a link in the description. Now I'll cut the edge bending for the tabletops, and then I'll cut mitered corners and glue them on. If I had been smart, I would have cut pocket holes into the sides prior to assembly to screw on the top, but I didn't, and there's not enough room for the pocket hole jig, so I'll just glue the top on. I'll add in a dowel to the top of each leg to counter any lateral force. I'll use these dowel locating pins and place the top over them and mark where I need to drill the holes to get perfect alignment. Now I'll cut the drawer fronts to length, and we've decided to bevel the ends so that we do not need any drawer pulls. This will leave a place to insert fingers at the ends of the drawer fronts to pull the drawer open. I'm drilling 5/16" holes for the drawer front screws. These holes are extra large to allow for slight adjustment of the drawer fronts if needed. I'll start from the bottom and then work my way up by using a 1/8" spacer between each drawer front. Now I'll drill a 2 3/8" hole for a grommet that the wires can run through. I'll round over the tabletops with a 1/4" roundover bit, and then I'll round over the bottom with a 3/32" bit. Liam wanted to have the night tables a black, modern look. I showed him a few different alternatives using India ink, black dye, and this black gel stain. It was the gel stain that he decided to go with because it revealed more of the grain, and he liked the brownish hue after it was wiped off. We just wiped it on, let it sit for several minutes before wiping it off. I don't normally like staining wood, but it doesn't look too bad. As the last step, I took everything outside and sprayed on a few coats of pre-catalyzed lacquer. Despite me teasing Liam throughout the project, I think he was pretty happy to gain some experience, and his bedside tables turned out well. And he may have grown a couple more inches over these last 2 years. Either that, or maybe I've started shrinking. So I gotta ask, would you make it?